We have, thank you, Martin. We have two topics this morning, and both of them are pretty much kind of follow-ups from discussions that we were getting into last week. The first one was Rick Devereux was going to talk to us about some additional research that he's done or thoughts that he's had about how we might consider moving forward with trying to control the amount of noise that landscaping companies make around here. And then also Tom and Brian, I think, had a call with someone from the DCR. I don't know whether it was the commissioner or not, or someone from the commissioner's office. And I think they're going to update us on that. So Rick, the text that you sent me, I have available to share on the screen if you'd like me to do that, or
if that's useful. If people want to know sort of what the kind of order of the talk is, that's fine. There's not any information in there really to keep. It's really more for me a guide to prompt where I'm going and where I think discussion is beneficial, and what I don't know about the town, because I am new here. 4 years, and I have ideas about the town and how things work, but I don't have the experience that any of you people have. So that's where I really need your thoughts and guidance. Let me just say this issue, I've been annoyed by the noise of leaf blowers for a long time, and I don't remember exactly when it was, but probably around the time when my sister was involved in Cambridge politics, and they took the issue up when she was on the city council. And I sort of, this was probably 2016, something like that, 2015. So I started, I was, because I didn't like what I was hearing, and I lived in Needham at that time, she turned me on to Quiet Communities, Jamie Banks. I spoke with Jamie back then and sort of, read the research at that time on them, and realized that it was a far bigger issue than noise pollution, and that it was, as you guys know, and as I think we talked about last week, I think it was Carrie, it's pollution, it's poor lawn care, it's a whole bunch of things, and the air pollution is scary for residents, and for anyone actually doing the work, it's very scary. So that's kind of how, a brief history of how I got involved in that there. So since then, I've been, reading and kind of keeping up with what local communities have been doing about it. There've been a bunch trying. It's a very difficult issue. And the noise part of it is usually the place where people try to attack, because you're more apt to find support from residents on that, particularly in towns that are somewhat dense, and where people live who are not also, using landscapers that are doing that. So the towns that are denser, like Cambridge and Brookline and Newton, to some extent, those kind of towns may have more luck with it. That's a generalization. I'm not sure that's exactly right. But in any event, let me fast forward to something that's happened in the last week since I talked with you, and even this morning since I wrote up the outline. And that is that a woman in Wellesley who I spoke with on Thursday night at a Sustainable Wellesley event in Wellesley Center is spearheading the effort in Wellesley, a second effort, because the first one didn't work, to try to do something about it. And she's taking an approach that I really like, which is she is, through Quiet Communities, trying to organize a community of towns in the greater Boston area to speak and to share about progress, thoughts, and other things this fall. And so I heard directly from her this morning that she's hoping that Natick will get involved in that. So I think that's something that we should do, and I would say that's probably a first step, because the town has a lot on its plate already. I mean, I think my focus, at least on the environmental front, is certainly on the Community Preservation Act, getting that passed. And I think we have a lot to learn from other towns before we try to make an effort to plow into this. How did we get here? How have we arrived at this point? This is on my outline. I think I kind of say this, what I think has happened, and I think where a lot of the problems that maybe Natick had before when they did this is that they really didn't even have the property owners on the side of doing something, because people wanted to have the freedom to choose what they did. And I'm not sure if people really understood the issue. I really doubt they understood the issue. And I think one has to make a distinction when you're talking about the noise of blowers between the gas-powered ones, particularly the two-stroke gas-powered ones, and the home models that people use that are electric, okay, which make a little noise, but it's not even in the same realm of decibels as what's going on with the gas-powered leaf blowers. I also had a conversation, I'll just jump to this too, a little bit out of order, but I was at a wedding this weekend down on the Cape, and one of the guests, it was a rather large wedding, is a landscaper. And he was very willing to talk to me. So I was chatting with him a couple of nights ago at a cocktail party. And he was, he feels very passionately about the interest, because again, the disadvantages of the electric leaf blowers are ones that it isn't just, there's three main ones. Okay, one is that the battery power is not what it needs to be to be serviceable on lawn after lawn, and they don't charge fast enough yet to be able to do that. So there's an efficiency issue, putting aside the issue of why are they using them in the first place, okay, which I didn't get onto with him because that's the third rail. But from their point of view, there's an efficiency issue, there's a cost issue, and there's a labor issue, which is he has tried using them before. He works in Cambridge. Cambridge is his place. It's an old family, business there. They have 85 clients or something like that in the town. And he had workers quit because of it, because of the weight of it, because of the, just the problems associated with using things that don't do the whole job the way they conceive the job being done. Okay. So that ties into what I was trying to say, which is how did we get to the point where we are, where these devices are ubiquitous and are being used by landscapers with the blessings apparently of homeowners everywhere? How does this happen? How does this come to be? And my sense is it comes to be because on the other side of the equation, homeowners, particularly new homeowners who are for the first time responsible for a property, moving from a city, many of those in this generation did not grow up themselves doing yard work. Okay, they grew up in the era when kids were very busy and programmed, and to be able to afford to live in any of these suburbs ringing Boston, you often have young people, both parents working. They were programmed as kids. They were always in activities, and the parents weren't saying, go out and mow the lawn, go out and rake the leaves, go out and do this. They didn't do that. They had no history of doing it. And they, when they bought the property, they, if they had an interest in the outdoor world, it was in gardening, which is great, but they didn't want to spend their time doing it. So they hire a landscaper, and the landscapers want to do the business as fast as they can. And people think, oh, the yard should be clean or whatever. I don't want leaves in my shrubs. So from their side, I think to get to the point and summarize where I am so far, I think there are two constituencies equally important in any town's fight to address the issue of landscaping and blowing. Residents are, I think, okay with the idea of restricting hours, which is, and somewhat okay, though not nearly as okay with the idea of restricting seasons when it can be done. So many towns have approached this on the one dimension of hours, not trying to ban gas powered leaf blowers, except perhaps the 2-stroke models, which are mainly not in use anymore because they're old, they're not very efficient, they're very smelly, and for those working with them, they're terrible. But the newer models are much better, and restricting their noise to after a certain hour, to not to happen on Sundays, particularly with people now Zooming religious services from the pandemic, and some of that's still ongoing. A lot of that's still ongoing. Just getting rid of the noise one day a week is a blessing. Making sure that it doesn't happen after the hour of 5 or before the hour of 8 or 9 in the morning is the most doable approach. But it still requires getting landowners, property owners, to support it in some kind of through a town meeting, and many towns have faced referendums on it, as Lexington just did. And it still requires conversation with the landscaping companies, because usually a town its property is dominated by, depending on the size of the town, several or more landscaping companies who are, feel like they're going to lose out on how many properties they can do when they're restricted by certain things, and God forbid they be restricted to certain seasons doing it. So they threaten to leave. They fund efforts to oppose it, and as Natick saw, I guess, when this first came up, and this is, again, my history is a little rusty or a little thin, having heard it only from a person or two, when an effort to do something here was defeated several times, going back maybe as long ago as 15 years. I'm not really sure. Does anybody know that, by the way? Let's pause.
Martin or Ricky,
I don't know.
go ahead.
15 years probably.
What was that,
So
Martin?
that noise effort was not solely directed at leaf blowers. A lot of it also dealt with construction noise, as I recall, of people coming in and starting banging and hammering at 6 in the morning and stuff, and there was opposition to restricting that as well. People people who work, because it wasn't directed solely at contractors, it was directed at noise. So in other words, noise you as the property owner are making yourself. And a lot of, again, Martin or Ricky, chime in if I'm remembering this wrong, but a lot of the opposition was, hey, I work all day. The only time I can work on my house is in the evening. And if I can't bang around and make noise at 10 o'clock at night, I can't fix my house. And that was a bunch of the opposition as well. And I have to say, we are in that camp who sometimes make noise. So.
Did it ever make it to a town referendum, or did it always get defeated in town meeting?
Always got shut.
It doesn't need to be a referendum. A town bylaw can be a town meeting.
Well, I guess what I meant was, did it ever get to the opinion of town residents, or was it only town meeting considering it?
Just town meeting.
Just town meeting, yeah.
Which is normal, really, for 99% of the issues that we deal with.
Yeah, I don't know what it would take, to if it's done by bylaw, I don't know what it would take on the other side to then force it into. It would take signatures, I assume, and to get it to be a referendum later to undo it. That's what Lexington just went through, is that the landscapers funded an effort to do it. Well, I think based on that, thanks Sarah for that information. I can see both sides of that argument, certainly, and I think the way to approach it the next time would be narrowly toward landscaping noise, because there's a real difference in quality. And I suppose if somebody is using a buzz saw outdoors, 10 feet from your bedroom window at 6 in the morning or 8 o'clock at night, that would be annoying. But that's more of a neighbor to neighbor issue, I think, than anything else. And I don't think there'll be any luck in trying to blanket the noise. I mean, it'd be nice to live in a so-called quiet community But to do that, you have to move further away than the suburbs. I would suggest right now. That just isn't going to happen. And construction, that would be an issue that might also have. I mean, like commercial construction, renovations, things like that, where you have major noise. That would be a whole nother kind of campaign. But I think it would be best to think of this as separating it out and directing it at one thing. And
construction,
first, yeah.
Excuse me, Rick, for interrupting.
Go ahead.
Some of the construction issues are covered. The special permits that the planning board awards, I believe, have hours of construction, and I think maybe some blanket planning board rules about hours of construction. So the planning board has been able to, I think, to do some of that on its own.
Good. Okay, well then, here's where I think we could probably talk that would help me to understand a bit. This is on sort of questions to address if you're looking at this thing on the screen. Do we have any information about what homeowners want or expect from landscaping and property control, or particularly landscaping in the community? Because homeowners need education on this issue and on what proper land care is. They're not going to get it from their landscaping company on the issue of blower use, okay? Because there's an assumption I found on that from the landscaping companies, that people want their yards, their lawns to look clean, and their shrub beds to be free of leaves and things like that. And this is more or less seasonal, all seasons. And I'm not sure that the landscapers don't feel that they'd lose business if they stopped doing that, or if they started telling people that it was bad for their lawn, not to mention bad for the other living things, the creatures in the lawn, bad from an air pollution and so forth. They might get some nods from people and go, oh, okay, well, does that mean you're going to rake it? And when it comes to raking, the conversation I had with the landscaper this week was like, that's never going to happen. Homeowners have no idea what raking, how poor raking is for your physical condition, your neck, your spine, etc. If you do it as a job full time, it's brutal. And they lose, he said, once again, we lose people are out on workers' comp, and it's not a replacement. You can't say to the landscapers, oh, just get them. And plus they can't find the labor. He said, finding people to do the labor and keeping them is getting harder and harder in this country. So we really need to know, in order to educate property owners and on this issue of what is an appropriate lawn, or what is an appropriate, fate for leaves that fall from trees and shrubs and other things. What can you do with them? What makes sense and all that? That's kind of an environmental education thing. And I don't know where Natick property owners are on that, but I think we'd find out if we started poking at this issue. And my sense is it's always best to find out ahead of time where people are going to have objections, because often, as we're seeing in politics right now, the objections make absolutely no sense when it gets down to science and fact. So there are many ways to get caught up in this thing. Any thoughts on that? I mean, Natick is a different town now, I assume, than it was 30 years ago. Most of these towns are. There are a lot of newbies like me moving in, and yet Natick, I think, still has a fair share of its population that's been here for a long time, and they have kind of an image of what the town is, and it may not jive with a progressive image. Thoughts on that one from people?
Well, I think one of the changing demographics, if younger two-income families are coming in, they may possibly be more progressive in their views, but they're not the people that are going to want to start doing landscaping on their own. Unfortunately, I don't think they're the folks you were talking about earlier that are going to feel they don't have the time for it or don't want to spend the time.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
you may
yeah,
get,
go ahead, Cindy. Yeah, go your hand up.
Yeah, am I, okay.
Yeah.
In my conversations with Claire Rundelli, about the Takawambe Trail, there's a one particular spot where neighbors are dumping, but it's really not the neighbors that are dumping, it's their landscapers that are dumping. And so Claire has, I think before, and I think this year again, she reaches out to landscapers. So Rick, you might want to speak to Claire about how does she do that, and how does she communicate with landscapers? And I don't know how she communicates with landowners, but she knows that you can't just go to the property owner because they really haven't a clue. They're not there when it's happening. And,
Right.
and since I'm speaking, and I will just mention my other comment that has troubled me over the years is seeing many of the people that work and have these blowers when they're working are not from this country. And I don't know whether the company owners, some of them may also be immigrants, but the risk of hearing loss from using those things is significant. And so I often have stopped to speak to the workers and say, you need to wear your head, you need to get earphones, you need to do that because you get to be 60, you're not going to be able to hear what people are saying. I mean, I have a hearing deficit myself, and it's not fun.
How have those conversations gone, Cindy? Have they been receptive to you telling them
Yeah,
that?
in the one case that I distinctly remember, yes, they were like, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think that I mentioned this last week. I think that's, often these are younger folks that are doing this work. And I think a lot of young folks just don't know, for a lot of injuries, you break your arm fixes itself, you lose your hearing, that's it.
Yeah.
And so it is
And
a significant issue.
I don't know if these companies fall under OSHA regulations.
They do. They do.
But I suspect that the Commonwealth and OSHA, whoever, I suspect that it's under the radar. They've got bigger fish to fry.
Yeah, Cindy, you're right. And the issue is I've spoken with them too. There's the company Riverside does our development up here. And shortly after I moved in, I went out and I noticed them, they were wearing noise canceling earphones. And I went out and, had a chat with them. And I said, this is great, you're doing this. Would you mind being in a photo? I was going to take a photo of them and with their, beside their Riverside truck and promote that and say, guys, this is what you should be doing. They said, oh yeah. So I took this photo, but I did then say, where's your, I need permission to do this. Maybe I shouldn't have asked for permission, but I said, I need permission to do this. Can you, somebody get back to me? They got back to me and they said, our owner does not want that to happen. And I can only surmise that, they don't want to publicize the fact that this issue, they don't want it publicized that this issue is an OSHA regulation because they're flying under the radar. And I think the other thing, my other comment on that, Cindy, would be that again, I would separate. I think that I've made that argument many times myself. The problem with it is now we know after the pandemic, it's like masks. You can tell workers, this is going to be really dangerous and harmful for your hearing, your future, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If they don't want to wear them, they're not going to wear them. I mean, they feel they don't have to do it. They're not going to do it. And OSHA's got no enforcement. The town is not going to do it. Right. So it's unjust, but that's the way it goes.
I think it has to come from the management of the company.
It has to come from the management of the company, but even so, a lot of these companies have a lot of crews out. And as you say, it's hard to keep people. And if you got to nag people about things that they're too stupid to follow, how much patience do you have? I mean, how many issues do you have?
I just know from my own career, if the company management takes safety seriously, it will trickle down to the workers. And if the company management is willing to look the other way, who's going to make all the workers do it? Some will do it of their own volition because they're worried about their health, but others will say, I'll be fine. And
Well, they're all
if you
competing.
have the I'll be fine mentality, but your boss is going to come down on you for not following the rules, you'll follow the rules. So that's my take on this from decades in industries regulated by OSHA.
Yeah, well, with respect to your wisdom, which I know is deep and great, Sarah, the only thing I'd say is that right now, it's not a situation where workers are lucky to have a job in this field. It's a situation where landscapers don't want to risk losing anyone. And if they irritate somebody and they feel like their manhood, I mean, the issues that happen.
Oh, yeah.
They feel like somebody's telling them what to do all the time, and it's the straw that breaks your back. Just go work for somebody else.
Yep.
So I see Pat's got his hand up, and I know, Brian, you had your hand up, but then you lowered it. But Pat, did you want to say something?
I think we can close the sharing. It's we can see each other better if we turn the sharing.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. Was there any more on this that you wanted to refer to, Rick, before I close the sharing? Or
no, but I would
continue.
say I don't know that there's been any outreach to the commercial landscaping companies in the town. And were they heard from, as far as anyone knows, or spoken with when the whole issue of noise regulation came up before?
Not that I recall. Martin, do you have any recollection of that?
No.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured, but yes, Ricky?
I think the person who proposed the noise regulations was Jean Williamson Ostroff.
Yes.
She's the one who had the town meeting articles. She had, I think, 3 of them. And unfortunately, town meeting was not too kind to
Was
them.
the vote close at all, or a landslide? No.
I don't recall, but she's the person who would know, Rick.
I remember it was so contentious that there was a motion to have a roll call vote so we could see who was voting which way, and that motion was defeated because apparently the people who were voting against it didn't want their names known. That's
wow.
But Jean is the person to talk to about this, Rick. She has the history.
Yeah. So Pat, I know you've had your hand up for a bit.
Well, yeah, I had a couple of questions. I know that we're talking about, the possibility of some reasonable regulations, and I guess they were not approved or voted down at a town meeting. But I was under the impression there was some regulation that the mow and blow folks can't really, they're not supposed to start before 8 a.m. or something like that. I don't know, is that somewhere that I thought that there was something. I don't know.
Right.
And I wondered if, along with the regulation pieces are very important, but it's kind of like re-educating and trying to provide some enlightenment for the community and the town with regards to landscaping and the way things are, yards can be transformed from these green pavement things to a very diverse, there are a number of yards that I've seen around town, including Carrie's, and where people are doing different things than just the old traditional green apron.
Yeah. The Eco-Natick site, where part of the thrust of that site seems to be to have an inventory of all of these green things that you can do, and then you check off, I've gotten a solar evaluation, or I've switched to a heat pump or whatever. Could we have an action that says I've stopped or have elected not to use gas, powered?
I think we could certainly, I guess I would see it perhaps as a broader action than that would have pieces to it or something, but I've switched from more quote unquote traditional lawn care to organic lawn care, which is something we've done. Or I've switched to doing my own raking and getting some exercise that's free. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's certainly a broad category that this would fit into of, pollinator gardens and organic lawn care, organic garden care. I think it certainly could fit into that. We have a meeting next week about or not next week. My goodness, is our next meeting to talk about getting the site more robust. So yeah, I'll certainly bring that up.
Well, particularly if it was, if there were educational materials that went along with this. So if you hear the reasons why you should consider doing this, then listening to what Rick has been saying, it's the takeaway I'm getting is we're going to have very limited to no success with regulation. What we need is education or one-on-one conversations with homeowners. And maybe just the way streets have block parties, maybe a local tight neighborhood comes together and says, on this street, we are really trying to stop the use of this stuff. And then you go and have a conversation with a house, and maybe obviously the people aren't there when the work is going on, but you leave a note in their mailbox or something and try to, but those conversations could be more productive if it's more than just, hey, I don't like listening to the noise, but here's all the reasons why.
Well,
you're actually doing a disservice to the workers you're employing. Or contracting with. You really want to be a part of that exploitative practice.
Could they incentivize people making the transition from gas powered to electric, battery powered mowers and trimmers, and not just the things that I don't think the landscaping companies are going to move in that direction very fast.
Right.
Because I think they have they want their big powerful machines do the job quickly, get it done. The more yards they do a day, the more money they make. So I think it's going to be a tough sell to the land, but maybe the homeowner, if they're still doing their own
yard, that's what I meant.
Maybe they could be persuaded to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
Well, good suggestions. I mean, I think I have hopes also for EcoNatick, and recently I thought about just going on and providing some, education on it about it. I think there's some of that is preaching to the choir. I like the idea of the community, the neighborhood stuff. I do think I know that the landscaping up here can't start before 8. I don't know whether that's a town regulation or just a homeowners association regulation, but that's easy to find out. So I'll find out on that one whether there is something in place on that. And that's then maybe there needs to be an additional see if an effort can be made to take that a bridge farther and have it not happen on certain days a week. The other reason for that, however, is because the other annoyance that I hear frequently from people and have is the landscaping vehicles blocking traffic at key times a day. So ideally, you would not want them out in force waiting to start at 8 a.m. as traffic and school buses are building up. I mean, the whole thing has just gotten ridiculous. If when you step back from it, it's absurd the way that this industries. I mean, there are absurd things about it. I don't know if the whole thing is absurd, but yeah. Okay, well, those are good ideas. I don't know how much time we have left or we want to spend on this now. I think a lot of thoughts need to go into it, but a topic for another day is just how progressive we think Natick wants to be. I'm sure there are people living here who would like it to stay the way it was and do not vote for progressive things and wish it wasn't a progressive seeming town that progressive people wanted to move to. That would be my hunch. And I think Natick may have a larger share of those people than some of the Wellesleys and Westons and Belmont that are making, sort of more progress quickly on issues like this. I may be wrong about that, but that's my sense.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that, Rick, but I think there's also maybe an interesting dynamic going on here that I don't think the share of people who use lawn services amongst the traditional community is as large as it is amongst the progressive community.
Yeah,
So
exactly
I
right.
think we've got this interesting dynamic that this is a place where the rubber meets the road and putting your money where your mouth is, that I think some of our progressive brethren are the ones that are using the landscaping companies.
Right. It's another thing we need to make them woke about.
You know,
Right. Yeah.
So-
Carrie, you've had your hand up for a bit.
Yeah, just kind of follows up what Pat was saying, and kind of unrelated but related to this whole conversation is when we were doing Coffee with a Purpose live back at the Common Street Spiritual Center, virtually every single Monday, whether the Commons needed to be mowed or not, they were out. The grass would grow maybe a half an inch, and they were out there for 45 minutes, cutting along with these loud machines and blowing the whole thing. In this day of budget crunching, you think the town could maybe scale back the DPW in terms of how often the lawn is cut. We haven't had rain in so long. Has the grass really grown to a point where it needs to be cut? Maybe they're from the department should, before they go out there with their lawnmowers, look how much the grass has grown and determine whether or not they really need to cut the freaking lawn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there might be some municipal enlightenment. I mean, starting with people like Jillian and maybe the Concom, maybe the trails, open space, those groups are kind of naturally aligned, and they might be able to spark some enthusiasm, for people trying to make transition to, quieter and things. And I think the other issue, the big one that Brian keeps in front of us, is the chemicals that are being used on this, this lawns everywhere. There's such that people have been so brainwashed, and that stuff it's really toxic. It's moving right into all of our waterways and streams and ponds and lakes, and it's very unhealthy stuff. It's terrible for wildlife and you name it. So there's got to be some education around this. Maybe the schools can do more to, try to build up a little, like Econatics trying to do, but maybe the school curriculum can start to embrace these ideas and get them across at least to our students,
Well, I think this is a discussion that really needs to involve Jillian.
Involve what?
Jillian.
Jillian and I have talked about this discussion, but in terms of and you're right, thanks for the thought to continue to keep her in the loop on it, that we're talking about it. It's not high. When I first brought this up, it was, the first month of the pandemic when everybody was out walking, and I was really alarmed by, both the nuisance and the danger of the pollution. Didn't get anywhere. She referred me to Jeremy. I talked to Jeremy in the town. I didn't have any luck with James White, though he acknowledged the issue in the health department. And they said bigger fish to fry. And that's the issue on this, is that it's a difficult one, and they understand it. But it's, anyway, if I were to, just a concluding remark very simply would be, people have given me reason to think that there's a way to bring the town together around this issue rather than dividing it. And I think that's going to take time. It's going to take education. It's going to take inclusion, meaning of everybody, landscaping companies included. They have some bias against some of the electric equipment because it doesn't function well. The guy the other night told me that he'd spent money on several of these things, and they, 3 lawns later, they were dead, literally. Now, maybe he didn't know how to take care of it. I didn't probe him on it. He's a friend of my nephew, the groom, and I wasn't gonna get into a long discussion about blowers, which is, infuriates these people at a cocktail party. So I could follow up with him, and he said he would be happy to speak with us. So there are people, and he's an intelligent, articulate, educated guy. This is not,
Was your reception indoors or outdoors, Rick?
Oh, it was outdoors. Everything was outdoors.
Yeah, and was there any background noise? That we had a
Yes.
family wedding here a number of years ago. The ceremony itself was in our backyard. And that was our biggest fear, was that somebody was going to start up something. And I had my whole line in place saying, well, Jesus was a carpenter. He made noise, but I didn't have to use it. So,
All right. Well, let me just tell you this. Every wedding I've been that's near water has had noise. And it's usually a jet ski, a cigarette boat. In Miami or in the Bahamas once, it was a party boat that went by very slowly. One of those things where everybody was drinking and pleasantly hooting and hollering at the bride and groom and clapping. It's impossible. And then the airplanes fly over, and yeah.
Well, maybe with this noise, talk about water. It's a good way to segue over to Brian and Tom to talk about their recent conversation with DCR. But I want to thank you, Rick, for continuing to do some research. I think it's an ongoing thing. Yeah, a number of conversations that can happen. This will.
Thank you for everybody for your ear and your thoughts, and let's stay in touch on it. I'll keep working on it, and I'd like, if anybody would like to join me in any effort this fall to bring different communities together and hear what other people are doing, what's worked in other communities, education and so forth. I'd love to have it, because more ears and more voices are better than fewer. So let me know. I did want to ask one question. I think it was you, Ricky, and there was noise here, so I didn't hear it. I heard the name Claire. That sounds like she's worth following up with, but I heard the name Ostroff, but I don't know which Ostroff it was.
The Ostroff you heard from me is Jean Williamson Ostroff, Josh's wife.
Okay, Josh's wife, Gina Williamson. Okay, thank you. And you think okay.
And as for Claire, someone else mentioned her. I don't know.
I think Martin.
Cindy did. Yeah.
I think Cindy did.
Okay.
And keep talking to that Wellesley lady that's organizing. She sounds like a good.
Yeah. Well, Wellesley is good. They have a good director, a good sustainability committee, and this woman is on it. And they have various people on that committee who are also town meeting members, as she is. So that helps. It would be helpful to get somebody from the select board, and I think there may be somebody that would do this, but again, it's a bandwidth question for them.
Yeah,
we'll see. All right, thank you, and carry on.
Yeah,
Let's go.
yeah. All right, well, thank you for that. So Brian and Tom, you want to take over? Yeah.
Sure. Let me just give you a quick, I've got a 10 o'clock appointment with Mass Save that
Oh, sorry about that.
work with. But these issues aren't only affecting just our neighborhood and community in Massachusetts. It's our state and actually worldwide, with the water quality, the climate crisis, which is continuing to worsen. And I think it's if we don't act soon, we're going to have an impossible job to correct it. And the EPA and OSHA, which Tom has just mentioned a lot, they seem to be toothless. There's no support. And in turn, our local politicians and institutions from DCR out says, if OSHA or EPA isn't looking at these issues, we can't delve into it, because that's just not supported. Or if they do delve into it, it's not got backing. And it's like letting these tree landscaping companies go down the roads and cut down trees arbitrarily just because they want to advertise. It's this pretzel logic of giving business its own carte blanche permit to go make business. And that doesn't make sense. And what we need is good leadership, starting at the top where people have a little vision and say, water quality is important. The quality of life with sound and our environment is the thread that holds us all together. Why can't we agree to come to some understanding that we have to start now to work on this? Spending $3 million on a PFAS plant, great, that helped us, but what's working on the basic core issues of this runoff that's affecting us? So, we're just kind of having these conversations, which is taking us around in this circular grief kind of that we're experiencing. It's like, how do we deal with it? And it's a real tough question, but lead by example. Realize that the paradigm for our future, electric cars, electric appliances, and landscaping devices, you can't give them a pass and say, go out there and run with your 2-cycle engines all day long. Those small engines put out a huge amount of pollution. There is not a single, restriction on those motors. Nothing's recirculated. It's raw pollution getting pumped out, and the fuel that gets spilled. So at some point in time, we've got to take this powerful step to say, stop, time out. We're dying, and you're feeding us more poison. Let's kind of change the paradigm and maybe be progressive. Gosh, what a terrible handle to get hung on us. We're progressive. We're saving our own backyards and our water. Oh, gee, sorry, So our DCR meeting was pretty much the same thing. DCR has 2.5 years in the last 30 years, I think it's been, that they've had a leadership position held at the longest time. They just changed. They got a new guy in. There's not any discussion about water quality. Their discussion is manpower and funding for their own DCR. Their peripheral vision as these hot topics, they don't even want to talk about them because they're hot topics. They don't know what they're going to do. They're just kind of backing off saying, look what we built for you. We got a new dock, be happy. And it's like, what about the water quality? This underlying primary principle that holds us all together. And they're like, now's not the time to talk about this. This is the wrong meeting. And that happens a lot. And it's like, when do you stop the game a little bit and say, this doesn't mean squat if you're coming out here to a cesspool of water that's poisonous. $2.5 million, that was just kind of an effort to placate some other individuals, that keep their image looking like they're trying to move forward. But the fundamentals, I think, are in crisis. I think that Cochituate's going to have problems big time this summer, and the water rescue that they're trying to set up and all these other things are it's not part of the big vision. It's these little segments that are coming into place, and some people are getting involved, but the big picture is kind of getting ignored, and it's not going to fix itself. And until the town, if they spent $3 million on a PFAS plant, spend some other money on some, better drainage, some settling ponds, and some other efforts. Make some efforts rather than just waiting for it to fix itself. And so that's my basic.
I think.
Can I ask? My understanding of this was that Tom had fed the Save Our Lake document that your group had put together to the DCR, and they had finally gotten around to reading it. And the reason for the call was to talk about the document. So was there any conversation about all of the issues that you have brought up in that document? Or
Jennifer Norwood, she's the regional director of outreach. Tom, you have her unmute.
You're on mute at the moment, Tom. Tom, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah. She's the director of external affairs and partnerships. And Susan Campbell it was the acting commissioner, and she handed to her the document and says, check this out. So we ended up having a meeting, Cindy and
Peter Golden.
Peter Baldwin
Peter made
and
a really good argument.
Brian and myself.
Presentation.
And basically, she said that she's going to see if she can find a master plan for Lake Cochituate. And she would get back to us probably not until after 4th of July. And so then I made a suggestion at the end as this, well, if you take a look at this document, it's got, and you can't find a master plan, this is a really good document to start with.
Yeah.
And
Did they acknowledge that there was good stuff in the document at all, or did?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was
Yeah.
real supportive, but you know, she's on the chain of command, and
Yeah.
they don't want to stick their neck out and say, yeah, we're going to try to do something in that direction. She's generally supportive and realizes that there's a lot of issues that are on the table and need to be taken care of. They're hopeful about the future, but when you talk to the gang, they were congratulating the woman that's leaving and congratulating the new man coming in. You know, an organization like that, they're not bringing up any issues. They're just kind of going around the circle and affirmation of their own existence, kind of saying, yeah, we're doing a good job, but it's on our own, you know.
Well, just a little perspective here for a second. Carol and I and others worked on this issue for a number of years. Carol longer than I was involved, but you know, there are regulations already established in the municipal law way that DPW does attempt to sweep the streets. They have a system where they have to clean out the storm drains, you know, every 3 years or so. A third of the town gets, you know, they've got some kind of rotation. There are some things that have been developed that do help with stormwater. But there was a study back in 2004, and Carol knows this guy too. It was a Massachusetts area planning guy by the name of Martin Pillsbury. And he wrote the whole kind of the document about the watershed, the Lake Cochituate watershed, which includes Natick and Wayland and Framingham, and even Ashland. You know, it's a big watershed. And the problem with our area particularly is that there's so much impervious cover, there's so much development, rooftops and parking lots and roadways. Very high percentage of our area is impervious, and you need some pretty creative, high vision stormwater strategies to deal with that. And we just haven't developed them. I mean, the other communities in this country are addressing those things much more effectively, or states, but they're called best management practices. And I'm sure some of you have heard of them and know about them, but yeah, there's a heck of a lot to do to improve, you know, which Brian's thing is the water quality, and I absolutely agree with him. It's our waterways are under big stress all the time with all this pavement, hard surfaces. It's tough, especially in this particular area of Metro West.
Let me ask you.
Is the state park, you know, for the holidays now, and yesterday they're closing access to the North Pond Gatehouse, and the rail trail access that's closed on weekends. You know, it's like, where's the logic here? They don't have parking. The parking's a big issue, but then they don't let the people come in off the rail trail, foot traffic, and the parking spaces there that they re-gravelled that lot at the North Pond, and then they closed the gate. And so the people are parking in the cemetery and the side streets. It's like, where's the logic for closing the gate for that access on the north pond? I just don't understand it. And you know, supposedly it was parking. They said, oh, the people wised up and they couldn't get into the main lot, so they went up there and snuck into the north lot. And now they've got to sign up for their automated parking program and said, if you don't have a parking citation or whatever, you'll be ticketed. But whether that system is in place or not, and why, if it is in place, don't they open the gate and get some income from it? And you know, it's just, the park is in transition. It's underfunded and under manpower is their common mantra that you hear from just about everybody. And it's like, if you're so underfunded, where'd you find that $2.5 million for the new dock and boat ramp? You know, that would go a long way. But anyhow, here we are, and that's, I'll quit my rant. I'm still working on it, but boy, is it frustrating.
Yes.
The pieces along the edge, if they just rake the water line at the beaches, they don't even think of it, you know? And it's like, gosh, it'd take somebody an hour to rake this debris off the beach. Why doesn't somebody do that? But, you know, the peripheral, the details like that, they don't see it. And it's like, okay, you know, that's the way they run it. And that's the way lack of leadership. It all boils down to lack of leadership to me. If the leadership doesn't see a problem, the people that work in there don't see a problem.
Low vision.
Yes.
Cindy, you've got your hand up there.
Yeah, so if you contact whoever you're supposed to contact about the parking issue, what kind of response do you get?
Well, I talk to Tim and the state people every time I go over to the DECR. If I see somebody around there, I talk to them. They're all pretty much covering their jobs in a very narrow scope. They don't have any peripheral vision. They come in and say, my job is to inspect the work here, or my job is to whatever it is. And they hit and run, because if they hang around there, the input that comes from people like me, they're like, I can't answer that question. And yeah, it doesn't make sense, but that's the way we do it, you know? And so.
And have you been in touch with people at the state level?
Oh, geez, you know, I've been working out. That's why.
I mean, that's what I mean. If you make a phone call and you say.
That's why I became a town meeting member. That's why I've done all this stuff. And it's so frustrating and so counterproductive a lot of times. It's like, I just stood in line to talk to that person and they're like, yeah, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
And, you know, there's nothing on fire, I guess, around here, except, you know, I think it will be before long here. Things are going to worsen enough. Somebody is going to get hurt, and this is going to come into focus, and they're going to say, look what we've been doing all this time, which wasn't in the best interest for the public. You know, I saw a guy diving off the retaining wall there just to the north of the valve house, where all those big rocks and everything are out in front of it. It's like, ooh, boy, I almost ran over and said, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. But then I just kept on walking, because it isn't my job really to police the park. But as a neighbor, I think it's helpful and a good citizen to warn these people of the hazards.
Brian, as you've been talking, I was just looking, I was trying to multitask and look at who some of our next speakers might be. And I noticed that we've got some local newspaper type folks that we're considering. Do you think, I don't know, maybe it's a low blow to consider embarrassment, but is there any possibility that we could get one of our local newspapers to write an article about all of the heroic efforts you and others have been doing to try to, you know, and having it all fall on deaf ears? Sometimes, you know, I'm thinking Globe investigative team. I'm not saying we go to the Globe, but that technique has worked sometimes. So bring in public attention.
You know, and Peter's been a big influence with this, and he was the editorial writer for the Metro West Daily News. And part of our information package had a draft op-ed to send out, and they had no interest in it.
Really?
And so we haven't really gone back to the newspapers, because we're still trying to coagulate our basic group and information package where it's a little stronger. And you know, we're trying to reach out to some study groups, and we're not giving up, but I'm certainly kind of reached my boiling point almost with the effort that goes into this, and the response that you get from the state people is like, oh, we'll just lock the gates. You know, we haven't got a problem here. We'll lock the gates and push you people out of here.
A quick question, Brian, are the beaches still no lifeguards at all, or do they have?
Right. No
Not at all?
lifeguards. No,
No, not any lifeguards.
no.
Wow.
Well,
That's not just here. I've read that.
Wayland, on their beach, you know, they're staffed up, and they've opened up their beach to, anybody can buy a ticket to use the beach for a day. That's all online, and the demographics of their beach people seems to be changing a little bit. The wiser people that have been using the facilities in the area said, oh, you know, we can get a Wayland beach pass for $30 for the whole family. That's got bathrooms and a much cleaner beach. They've been in hand pulling weeds.
And that, so, but the state beach doesn't have any lifeguards at all.
No, and it's got a roped in swimming area. Majority of the people use that, but a lot of people use just to the north of it along that shoreline. And you know, there's a lot of people on the lake now. And the boats are, boat locks, ramps are back. The boat traffic's increasing, and so, you know, I just think it's kind of an accident waiting to happen in a lot of ways there. But I guess that's the price you pay for being popular and successful.
Brian, I think I know the answer to this. I think I know the answer to this question, but there's not an ongoing water quality testing program for the lake. Is that true?
Right. I think they do it weekly or maybe twice.
But
a
is
week.
that just looking for, a lot of times public beaches are required to look for coliform bacteria?
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that whole major database of historical water quality is non-existent or not available to anybody that doesn't know what company did it or who's got the records or any of that.
Yeah.
And right now, I think they're probably doing their weed remedial action through Solitude, which they were hand pulling in at the Wayland side, and about the same time is usually when they do the chemical treatment. I haven't seen any mailers and haven't heard anything from anybody, but they're not good with information anyways.
Cindy?
Yeah, just one more thing. I have a cousin in Connecticut who joined a group that, this is in the Stonington, Connecticut area, and a nonprofit group had volunteers doing water quality testing once a week in particular areas, and then they published that data. It's a nonprofit, and that was one of their activities. And it's very powerful when the citizens do the testing, pay for it, and then say, yo, everybody, here's what's going on.
Charles River Watershed does
They're
that.
doing that now. They're expanding their.
So maybe that's a way, a route to consider, because I suspect you could get the volunteers and the money to do that.
That whole concept, I think, is something that the community health department and conservation commission ought to be wholly bought into, and that should be under their responsibility. You know,
Sure.
Do something besides regulate building. You know,
Well, they have.
Permits.
Right, but I mean, each of these groups has their own jurisdiction, and they're very territorial.
And
so
very tunnel vision.
Yeah,
they don't look at any other thing.
Well, but they in some ways they have a certain responsibility by law what they're supposed to focus on. So I guess the suggestion is if some outside group just goes in and starts doing the testing for maybe 1, 2, 3 years, and just pay for it and then publish it, then you get the attention of the people that haven't been doing anything in response.
When the league first started, the Watershed Association back in the 70s, that was one of the things that they did. The person who was most instrumental in that, her name is Shirley Brown, and she's still alive. She's in her 90s. And she, and what they did was they wanted to see what industry was dropping into the lake, the inflow areas that were not permitted I'm not sure exactly what the regulations were, but apparently there were industries that were dumping effluent into the lake, and the league members, there were volunteers. Talking to Shirley might be just interesting for you. I asked Cindy, I can give you her phone number if you're
Can we
interested.
jump in and jump out? The Mass Save guy is here. Thanks for your ears. Sorry, I get ranty about this, but I think we're at a climate crisis that we're not going to believe in the next couple of years. So
Yeah.
good luck,
Well, thank
everybody.
you,
See you
Brian.
later.
Good
Thank
luck
you,
with
Brian.
Mass
Good
Save.
luck with
Thanks,
Mass
Brian.
Save.
Well,
Yeah.
Cindy, if you would like Shirley Brown's phone number, I'll be happy to share it.
Sure.
Give me a second. I'm looking it up as we speak. She was our water quality lady. She did a lot of advocacy work with at a state level. Granted, it's history, but still, it might be interesting and or instructive if you're talking about volunteers and testing and what's going on in the lake. Wait a minute, I'll get her.
I think the testing it can be kind of expensive. So you have to ramp up some serious funding if you're gonna, that's where it gets a little complicated.
Yeah,
know-
there's sort of some low level testing that you can do yourself in the field that's not super expensive. But that's probably not going to be at the level. The one thing you could do that's really quick and relatively inexpensive is specific conductance, which gets at dissolved ionic materials, salts and things like that. So that's cheap to do, and that'll give you some indication of, road runoff in the winter and what have you. But a lot of the other things that we've been talking about are indeed more expensive and more involved. They have to get to the lab within a certain time, and they have to be within given kind of container and yada yada. So it's certainly something can be done, but you would need to think about it carefully to put together. You're always in this kind of work looking for the sweet spot between enough information and not going bankrupt. And, so it would require some thought, not that it couldn't be done, but it, would require.
For anybody who's interested, the name is Shirley Brown, and her phone number is 508 653 7433. Let me just make sure I'm reading this properly.
Years ago too, Brian, he's not here, but I think Doug and Martin know that the Carling Brewery discharged fairly heated water
Yeah.
into the lake. That was one of the problems they were having.
And they
really
killed all,
tough.
they couldn't stock the pond with fish anymore because of that.
Yeah.
There used to be that pond next to Carling's was always stocked every year. All right, 653-7433. That's the right number for Shirley Brown. Tell her I sent you.
Sarah, could I ask Sarah, I heard Charles River Watershed presentation about 3 weeks ago here in Natick at somebody's house. And two things of interest. One, they're looking for water testers right now. Two, and they are they have been funded largely from grants. They are now moving toward fundraising in order to try to triple the size of their organization to deal with the problems in the Charles River. And that's a good thing. I don't know to what, two questions. I don't know to what extent the runoff here in Natick all contributes to problems in the Charles River. But my hunch is the reason they test in all these communities is because they're trying to find out where things are coming from.
Mhm.
So I think Natick has a tester, but I wonder, and I think they're volunteer testers. I wonder whether some of that, talking to them or having them come to us, since they're the woman who spoke is looking to come out and speak and generate support for what they're doing, but she also might have some ideas if we're looking for, ways to do it. So
Yeah.
Doug, if you're looking for people who could speak, she's very articulate. She has, slides and presentations and so forth. I think she would do that because I think that's what she's doing.
Do you remember her name?
Yeah, I've forgotten her name. I can get her name. She's a director. I think she's the new director of the association, if I'm not mistaken. She's anyway, she's very bright. Young,
Yeah,
articulate.
I had a membership there for many years and somehow something fell off the radar and they never sent me a renewal and I forgot to do it. I keep meaning to rejoin.
What kind of testing do they do? Do you know?
I don't know offhand, but I can look it up. I know they've been doing it for many, many years. And as I say, I think a lot of it is kind of what I was talking about earlier. Some basic field testing, looking at pH, dissolved oxygen, specific conductance, things that you can buy a little meter, bring it out with you in the field and do it right on the spot. And my guess is that they're doing that as a screening level. And then selectively doing more extensive stuff. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor, they do your blood pressure and your height and your weight and a couple other things. And from there, then they say, well, based on your history, we think you should have this test. And that assessing water issues is kind of the same way. You look at what's going on in the area and target what you should be looking for.
A lot of what
I'd be happy to look into their past data.
All right, a lot of their talk, Sarah, was about invasive species and dealing with that, which is a function of, water temperature, water, alkaline, all of that stuff. I don't understand it that well, but one of us, Doug, to your point, and Sarah, to your point of looking for potential speakers, I would suggest that we try to get either her to talk about it, or if we're really looking for somebody more on a granular level about testing. But that would be a thought. The other thought would be, you mentioned media, I think, or somebody mentioned media involvement.
Right.
Well, the Natick report, the digital daily, Bob Brown is doing, he's planning to retire from his job with the state, and he and his wife, to do this more seriously. I wonder if they would be interested in, coming to one of these sessions, talking about what their goals are, what kind of things they want to cover, and learning something about, what are some of the issues that people in town are passionate about. They started in Wellesley with the
what was their name again?
Brown.
The
Brown.
town
His name
report?
is Bob Brown. I'm in touch with him by email. I've sent him things before on various issues, and sometimes he covers them. And he covered some of Eco-Natick, some of the Eco-Natick Earth Day stuff as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good choice, and we are starting to approach 10:30 here, so we should think about wrapping up.
Yeah, I'm going to preview the next session.
Actually, that's a good point. Here's the. Let me just share my screen one more time. Here's our calendar, which Ricky, I advised you improperly. I didn't think we had anybody lined up for the 11th. Next week, of course, is 4th of July, so we won't have a session. On the 11th, Martin, it looks like you've confirmed Jillian, and you, the two of you are going to give an update on the dam. Is that right?
But in terms of future sessions, why don't we continue to talk about that? And I realized that I believe tomorrow, the 28th, is the deadline for filing for the special town election to fill in for the select board for the next 6 months until the regular election.
All right.
We had talked about somebody.
Well, did Rich Sidney?
Rich might be a candidate. I don't know if he's actually
Yeah,
filed.
I was seeing his name here somewhere as a potential speaker, and I wasn't sure what he had what he was for.
Talking about filing, but why don't we see who actually does file and then recruit them?
Okay,
I don't know how
Yeah.
many, I can't imagine.
I have a quick intercession here. I had an email back and forth with Annabelle Burrell and she was available to speak on July 11th. But she and I have not been having a real back and forth, but I'll postpone that, see if we have a July 11th already. So what's open now then, Doug?
well, actually, they're all open after that. We are hoping to get, Ricky was just telling me this morning about a high school graduate, Miriam Siegel, who won the political participation scholarship from the Democratic Town Committee. She's going to be going to Georgetown, and her passion is government transparency. So she could be a nice, energetic speaker. I've got it to do to call her and see when she's available this summer. But basically, anything from the 18th, July 18th.
Doug, do you remember the woman that we had? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
Sarah looked up her name.
Scotia Hill.
Scotia Hill, who
Yeah.
is at Georgetown, right?
Right.
So I don't know whether she and Miriam already know each other. They definitely should meet if they don't.
I think Debbie Marion also was connected with that group. Deb Marion knew.
Oh, okay. All right.
And,
I've got
So,
the contact information if you need it.
for
We've been-
Scotia. Oh,
I
good.
think Gary knows too.
Yeah. Sally, remind me who, did you say Annabelle? Who is she?
Annabelle Burrell. Cindy, can you elaborate a little bit on Annabelle?
So Annabelle is she lives in South Natick and she is a consultant. And for business leaders, I know her because she runs a meditation group that I participate in, that she invited me to join when the pandemic started. And I think she's on retainer with Northeast Delta Dental. She has a background in finance and accounting. She comes from South Africa. She taught 20 years at Northeastern, and she was running the Women's Leadership Institute for several years and had conferences with women leaders. And she's
Her book is on leadership.
her book is on. She's written several books. She has a website, and when I spoke with her, I said that really she could choose what she would want to speak about.
That's what I said too.
But so she could speak on a number of different topics. The most recent thing she did was offer a seminar on ethics and the ethics of war, just unjust wars. Wow. It was a seminar, and we had, it was supposed to be 2 sessions, and then we didn't finish, so we had 3, and then she wrote and said, no, we still have to have 1 more. So she's just a very interesting person. And
what was her last name again?
Burrell, Beerel.
Great.
Her parents fled Europe and went to South Africa. And that's where she's probably like 70-ish.
If either of you would be willing to reach out to her and see if she's available sometime in summer.
I'm in touch with her, so
Oh, great, Sally. Okay.
I'll be happy to, we're emailing.
Yeah. Carrie, did you have something?
Yeah, I just want to see if you had any luck tracking down Jamie Erickson, see if he's available sometime.
I gotta follow up with him. I actually, I followed up on your contact, and then I actually ran into him in the parking lot of the community center, and he said he was gonna get back and he didn't. So I don't, do you want to do the next contact, or should I? I can. I did. I thought I contacted him last. Maybe I'll
reach out to him initially. So we have pretty much all of August is wide open.
I don't know. We haven't talked about.
Yes, it is. August is wide open. Yeah. And we have a number of interesting speakers. I see folks were also suggesting Amanda Loomis, the new director of community and economic development.
Yeah, probably Spacer from Jamie though, because they're both high-level town officials, maybe.
Right. But yeah, and yeah, on the media, besides the ones that Rick was mentioning, we had spoken of Susan Manning, editorial director for Natick Town News, and Rick Holmes, who's a longtime journalist. And
Yeah, Rick would be terrific.
yeah, so we
Yeah,
just
the
need
Natick
to reach out to some of these.
The Natick Town
folks.
News, I think there was a thought of pairing that with the Browns because they're both sort of new local media. They don't have to be paired together, but I think that was one thing Cindy might have mentioned.
The
Actually, I
one
was-
caveat that I would say as far as Miriam is concerned, I think she leaves for college mid-August. So if we want to have her and to have someone from that generation, which we really haven't had in our speakers, we'd have to fill her in, you know.
Yeah,
someday
well, why don't
before.
I'll reach out to her and try to get her for the 18th or the 25th then of July. And then we can go from there. So,
Just
Good.
to clarify, I was not thinking about the Browns because I reached out to the Natick Neighbors. It's just that glossy one.
mhm.
And I didn't actually hear back from them, but Susan wrote back right away and we had a nice chat.
Okay,
She's from that, the newsprint, Natick News, I think it is.
yeah, Natick Town News, yeah.
The free one that we get once a month, is that it?
Yeah, I get two free ones. I get a newsprint one, the Natick News, that's Susan Manning. And then
Yeah.
I get Natick Neighbors, which is glossy and it features a family every month.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that, but I've
Yeah,
never
we get
received
that
it.
one.
Yeah, speaking of print newspapers, here's just a mostly unrelated question. Does anybody get the Globe or the Metro West Daily News delivered to
I
them?
get,
Yes.
I get the Daily News to it.
Have you had any recent
the Globe.
problems getting it delivered?
Yes.
We were away in Scotland, as you know, and we did a vacation stop, and it's now going on 2+ weeks since we got back. We still haven't gotten our paper. I call every single day.
Yeah,
So-
I think there's
Ask for Dan, get
Yeah.
to your supervisor right away.
Well,
And
I
then-
haven't been able to find a live person for Metro West. Do you know a number I can call or?
Let's talk.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. I
Anyway,
do have a live person.
Dan I had a subscription to the Natick Bulletin and Tab. That's why I met Annabelle, because she was getting it. She lives
Oh.
at 5 Lincoln Street South. She
Okay,
was getting my paper. So then I figured that out.
Mhm.
Anyway, I got 50% of the papers and now I think I've just finished a year's free worth of Sunday Metro Daily West. But I didn't get it yesterday. So.
But there's no tab anymore, is there?
No, that went away last year.
Right.
all right.
Anyway,
Martin,
but
I don't know
but
if you've
it's the
stopped the
same,
recording or not.
same
good.
delivery
I'm
service.
gonna trim off the end of this recording.
Okay,
Why don't I stop it and I'll trim it off? I'll trim
now
off.
that I've taken us totally derailed, but
But I
it's
lost-
been a good discussion as usual and a
Yeah, I-
lot of great